Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see a good attendance today. And what a fantastic day as we get into our 30s officially today. In fact, we are really privileged to host our 31st author interaction with an author who's been a very, very senior news anchor and news editor for NDTV for more than 15 years and has been a columnist now for major international and national publications, besides being a renowned author now. So welcome, Jyotsna, on our Trends platform, and we're absolutely delighted to have you on board today.
Thank you so much, Neeta. I'm really looking forward to this interaction today. Thank you for having me.
Our privilege entirely, I must say. So Jyotsna, she's written the book, which is really talked about, Stoned, Shamed, Depressed, an explosive account of the private lives of the Indian teens. It's a bestseller. I must show you the book, though you might see it upside down.
No,
And this is a bestseller. Yes, we can show it together. This is the book. Very bright and very nice book. I've been able to go through it, most of it, and I intend to finish it very soon. And it does provoke a lot of emotions, I must say, this book. I also have a teenager, and while I was going through this book, a range of emotions really hit me. And I also believe that it is indeed a strange time for anyone to be alive, and even more so if you are a teen. That's what makes Jyotsna's book very, very important harbinger of change. It chronicles the confused journey of Indian teens to adulthood along a road that is full of temptation, where boundaries are easily blurred, and where the lure of easy adventure, often in the virtual world, can unleash events that have repercussions for years to come. In fact, your book, Jyotsna, is a timely reminder. And as I read, and as I quote Mr. Pranay Roy, that we often speak to our children and not with them. That's a very, very important statement to me. And most of the parents here today will really, really, relate to this. So why do you think, I'll be getting into the conversation immediately, Jyotsna. So why do you think your book is a must read for the parents? And what are you trying to convey through the book? And what are the important takeaways from the book?
See, I think that a lot of us think that we know what's going on in our children's life. But today's generation, I think, is unlike any other generation. Although, we always say that with subsequent generations, everything changes and things are different. But, no other generation, not even the millennials, were born into such a spotlight of social media and digital awareness as this generation is. And I think that changes a lot. I think we underestimate the impact on our children today of the number of likes they're getting on a post or the number of followers they have on Snapchat. It makes or breaks them, and it's very scary for me to have spoken to so many children and trying to understand that it's a generation, and the two dominant characters that came out for me on an average amongst all these children was that A, they're very fearless, and B, there's a lot of angst and sensitivity, very emotional generation. So I think to understand this generation, to understand really what's going on, this is a book that hopefully helps parents to connect with their children a little bit more, because a lot of children who've written into me once the book has come out saying that they don't know how to communicate with their parents today, and the fact that communication has just stopped, it has dropped. And some kids have written in that for the last 1 year we haven't had decent conversations, and that kind of issues. So I feel like if nothing else, this book it's just going to help parents and children. And I just don't say that this is a book just for parents. I say, any kids, mine is 12 years old, she's read it, and I think it's a demographic of say about 15 to 50, and it hopefully will bridge communications and conversations between families, for children to understand what the parents are going through today, trying to adapt to this world where the technology is so predominant, and for parents to understand what it is to live in that spotlight, what it is to live under this kind of peer pressure, which is unlike anything we ever went through, Neeta, completely.
Absolutely. I mean, these are the challenges all of us are facing right now. We as adults and children, this regular communication has to go on. And that's the reason why we should have a continuous dialogue on a platform like ours. And We have Josna today, so whosoever has joined late right now, and we are discussing the book Stone Shamed Depressed. In fact, as we are just discussing that your book really navigates through the lives of teens and their addiction to social media, games, and substances. So, what led you to research and write a book, which is such an explosive subject and such a relatable subject? Something which has been close to our heart the entire last year and even before so.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I find that we really don't bring up issues that involve our children out into the open. Also, because as a society, we tend to dismiss it very easily. We don't. If there's body shaming, we'll say it's just a phase they're going through in school. If it's bullying, it's a phase they're going through in college. If there's anorexia, bulimia, mental health, we'll say, it's not tangible. Because it's not tangible as a society, we prefer not to take it seriously. And so my issue has been that over time, I've been seeing the increased dependence of very young children on gadgets. I've tried to see that 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds who've been gifted iPads, who've been gifted a smartphone or a television set in their own bedrooms at that young age. Where does it take these children? Where is it taking their parents who've gifted it as well? So I think I was trying to connect the dots, trying to see if these children then are what we see as headlines later. Unfortunately, I mean, are these children then part of the bigger problem, like the Mumbai WhatsApp case, or the Snapchat bullying case, or even the boys locker room, which was the last big incident? And secondly, Nita, also for the fact that, like I said, everything has changed. It's changed enormously. The playground for the children is very different today. And I think
Right.
we, as parents, as a society, more than parents, I think we need to take that into account. We need to listen to the fact that it's a different ball game for children. We can't simply dismiss it today as saying that bachon ko kya problem hai, they have no problem, these are all kids plays, they'll get over it, they'll solve it amongst themselves. Although I do think we should let children solve a lot of their issues. But I think my issue has also been that this was a space that was waiting to be explored. And I just felt like, why should it just remain a headline for like 24 hours or 48 hours? Sensationalism, 72 hours, and no one talks about the boys locker room. And yet these issues, they underlying. When the boys locker room happened, and I spoke with so many children, they said, it's just one case you're referring to. There are so many that are going on endlessly and nobody speaks about them. So the attempt has been to bring it out into the open, to say that yes, we need to take a deep breath. We need to all pause as a society, as adults, and see really what's going on with our children today. Plenty is.
Absolutely right. We need to really introspect. And, you were just mentioning about the mobile phones. This remains as one of the biggest challenges for us today when we are talking about maybe iPhone 11, 12 coming up, birthdays. You find parents presenting the children with iPhone 12, and then there is a peer pressure. Okay, I don't have. So how do you think this can be avoided? This has become actually one of the worst things possible. This fight, this peer pressure about the phones. So how can it be avoided, and what do you propose that it can be avoided for parents not to get into this peer pressure?
I think firstly, as adults, I think there are two things. I find that we as adults, Nita, also consider social media as a toy ourselves. We're still playing with it ourselves. We are still trying to figure it out for ourselves. So agar hum बैठे and we are sitting and we're clicking selfies, our children are watching what we're doing. If we rather click a selfie or we rather click a photo before answering our children, then they're going to imitate our behavior exactly as we're doing it, firstly. And I said, secondly, we give in very easily to our children. We've stopped saying no to them as much as our parents probably said to us. And maybe these are the pressures of modern day society. Maybe double income families, we're all exhausted at the end of the day. I understand that completely, but and we'd rather, and I say this to my children, and there's always a sarcastic, oh, mama is having that one cup of tea, so she can't play with us. And I'm like, just that one cup of tea, that's all I want. So I know that the pressure to give in is very easy. If a child is, well, if I'm sitting and having that cup of tea, if my child is coming and saying one time, can I play a game 5 times, 10 times, chances are 10 times a lot of us will say, just do what you want, just give me some time out. But I think we have to look within ourselves to see whether is that something worth giving into? And I understand the pressure, I really do. And I think that it's all about, one step at a time. You give them one step, but you've got to take two steps back. So the peer pressure is enormous. You can't have them being ostracized. I deal a lot of that with my own daughter. And, in a class where everybody has a cell phone and she's the only one who doesn't have a mobile phone, I deal with it on a daily basis. And the pressure is enormous, Neeta. I get all kinds of, comments from my own daughter saying that, this is just because you've written it doesn't mean you're right. And those kind of things, because I understand where she's coming from. Because the kind of pressure for girls is even more than it is for boys today. 12-year-old girls are 16, 17 of our generation. And everybody wants to be part of it. Nobody wants to be ostracized. And today, to be part of the crowd, you have to have a cell phone, you have to have an Instagram account, you have to be on TikTok making videos. There is nothing of the old times. And there are no conversations. If you speak, and I've spoken to many children, and even after the book, I spoke to many 20-year-olds, and I said, so tell me, you've got all these number of followers on Instagram, 10K, 20K. How many friends do you have offline? Most of them were like one or two. That's it. That's the average. There are no conversations. It's very sad. And I think that's what parents need to, I think it's tougher, but I think we need to invest a little bit more time with our children, as opposed to investing their time in a gadget. I think in the long run, that's what matters. And I think they'll thank us, because I think middle school is a little bit more dicey, Nita, than senior school is. Senior school, I think they settle down, they've played with it, they've understood, they take what they want. And there's a lot, as I mentioned, even right in the introduction of the book, there's a lot of good stuff coming out of social media, out of the digital world. And these children are exploring it. And the older they are, they'll be able to explore it a little bit better. The kind of activism that they're involved in, whether it is creating drug awareness or bullying awareness, a lot of them are actively involved in it. But it depends on what age you are to be able to harness the good of social media.
Absolutely right. And see, the last year, most of us have used the social media as the only way to communicate with people. In fact, your book also, I mean, it's been so popular also because, it could only be promoted, I think, through the social media. So as you grow older, you realize what is the importance, how you can kind of filter the right things. In fact, I get very fascinated by your cover. So bright and so interesting and so attractive.
Thank you.
And some of the readers did mention that they were really attracted in the first place by the looks of the book. So who designed it for you? I mean, did you design it yourself?
No, it's HarperCollins. The cover is HarperCollins, and there was a lot of back and forth with the font and the colors, but they obviously know better, and I think they did a fabulous job with it. And so it was all HarperCollins, the cover, and the name was us, but the cover and the design was a bit of tweaking here and there that goes in. You've got to be careful of sensibilities and stuff, but I think it was all them, yes. And
even the title of the book. So how did you kind of really come out with such an explosive name?
This was my editor and me brainstorming, and I think we were just trying to take out the best we could from the chapters of the book, right?
Right.
So there's basically chapter number 2 talks about drugs, and it talks about the rampant use of hash and marijuana and vaping as a culture. And shamed, very, very close to my heart, for the simple reason that, Nita, I have to tell you that the chapter on body shaming really broke my heart when I was writing it. I spent many sleepless nights, just trying to internalize what I had got on my book, what I was writing, what came out of the interviews, what the children were telling me. So, and depressed, of course, mental health is so very huge amongst the young adults and amongst the teenagers, middle teen. And also, for what I found out after the book, children in their 20s, huge. Mental health is so huge. So I think we just, we were coming up, and so it was really my wonderful editor, Swati, who's, had back, and she's a fabulous. I absolutely lucked out with her. And so we were just, I think, sitting over a cup of tea at the India International Center and trying to brainstorm. And we just came up with these words. And so it's been a good reception. Of course, it's also used to troll me. So every time on Twitter, if somebody doesn't agree with my view, all they have to write is, "You're stone shamed and depressed, go away." So you know how, but those are how things work today in society. You got to take it in, you got to take it out. There are all kinds of people, and you get the good, you get the bad. And but yes, I'm very pleased with it. I was very pleased with how it came out, and I was very pleased with the fact that it made a dent where it was meant to make a dent. And
Absolutely.
everything else is, by the way, and people talk, that's it's not important. My intent has been to create awareness amongst parents, amongst teachers, amongst educationists, amongst psychologists, and I think I have managed that to a very large extent. We constantly get calls to speak in school and give talks, and not just to students, but to parents and teachers alike. And so that's been my intent, and also for children to understand that someone has finally heard their voice, and also that, and they're very grateful to me for that, Nita. I can't tell you, it's been it's been a very profound and poignant experience, in a sense, that the amount of children who've written in saying that,
Yes.
"Thank you for writing, because no one writes about us and no one talks about us." Like you said, we talk to our children, we don't speak with our children.
Absolutely right. Your book actually is divided into 6 chapters. So, which is the closest chapter to you? Which really moved you, and it has left a mark on your? You've spoken to so many children. You've spoken to so many parents. So, what is that special chapter which is really close to you?
I
6 chapters.
I think it has to be shaming for the kind of the kind of battle within that children
Yeah.
are going through, that a lot of them can't speak about because they don't know where to speak. They don't know if they'll be taken seriously, about the fact that these are issues that they're targeted, and the senselessness of being targeted for being overweight, or not being or not conforming to what is society's conventional idea. And unfortunately, you have to think again and say, where are these children getting these conventional ideas from? They're obviously listening to it either on TVs, or they're to it in their homes. And so it allows you to take a step back, and it did allow me to tell my children here that I do not want to hear the word fat even when you're laughing. You're fat. No, these kind of words are not allowed in my house anymore. So it was a journey for me as well, Nita, to understand really what is going on with children, but children breaking up. So, like I said, very, very emotional, very, very, so full of angst. But it takes a lot to just say that I didn't get marks, so I just slashed my wrists, or I didn't make it to the student council, so I overdosed. Or
Yes.
that, I was put up, my photo came up, my mother didn't know that I was at a party, so I overdosed and I had phenyl at 2 in the morning. And these are brilliant children who are speaking to me, Nita. Children who I cannot fault them for anything. They're well-mannered, they're intelligent, they're speaking to me casually, very matter of fact, and saying, "Auntie, so I just, I keep biting on my inner cheeks," because the purpose of it is to bring out pain. And, we have to feel the pain. And I'm not trying to kill myself, but how do you then not cross the line sometimes? How would you know if you've crossed the line when you're slashing your wrists and slashing your legs? So this chapter, it troubled me enormously. It gave me too many sleepless nights for the kind of repercussions it had for the children. So body shaming is not just body shaming as we think, it's the scars that it's leaving the children. It's the kind of actions that these children are taking today. And so many school principals agree with me, that I've spoken with this. It's so rampant. Self-harm is so rampant today. So you have to wonder how can we stop this, and why are they reaching the situation to self-harm themselves? And that really that was something that really bothered me. The other thing was, of course, gaming, which it didn't
Yes.
bother me, but it was a revelation for me. Because Nita, and I say this where I pushed, it's my last chapter, if you see it in the
Yeah.
book. It's the 6th chapter, and I kept pushing it right to the end, saying that, I'm going to write this in the end because I don't think it weighs in with the kind of explosive stuff that I've got in the first 5 chapters, because I'm not sure that I've got, that kind of exciting stuff in for gaming. But when I finished it, my editor and I were just astounded by what we have found in that chapter. You know, gaming is so underestimated in our country. And I say this to all parents out here who have children who are gaming. Watch what they're gaming, especially when it's multiplayer games. And I'm not just talking, which I have brought up. I mean, I have brought up the fact that WHO considers it to be a disorder. And I've talked about the physical aspects of it, that, you know, a lot of children are gaming nonstop. And especially during the pandemic, it's obviously increased, right? So the eyes, the hands, the nerves, everything. But more than that, it's the kind of stuff that goes on online through gaming, you know, the kind of people who are involved. If you've got 40 to 50 people in a multiplayer game, chances are 30 to 40% of those are not who they seem they are. There are a lot of adults, a lot of predators out there, not just on social media, but on gaming. And cyber experts, cyber safety experts that I've spoken with, Nita had just one thing to say: whether it's social media or gaming, please tell your children that A, they should not have very easy passwords. B, they should not just trust not even their best friend. Because, and I've got these incidents that I've written about. I don't know if you've come across, but you know, a boy whose nudes were leaked by his best friend, because there are no friends online. And I think for children, we have to really teach our children that, to sit down and tell them that what you find your tribe. You know, I think there's this desperation to find friends online because it makes you cool. But the kind of stuff that is going on, you want to play games. A lot of children that I spoke with, they were gaming because they suddenly found, before the pandemic, obviously, that they were not meeting anybody out in the park or in the mall because everybody was indoors. So they had no choice but to go with the flow. But to these children and to these parents, I say, they will always find their tribe. You will always find your tribe. I have, I mean, as a 12-year-old, my child is not on any social media. The 8-year-old still tries even more, but you know, they're not. And I say that it's a tribe, and I think there is angst. It's not easy. It's not easy by a long mile, but that doesn't mean she has no friends. She has friends, and you know, she has people that she connects with on a different level. But gaming, yes, there's predators, there's grooming, as social media, as cyber experts call it. This is when you know, strangers get onto games and try and build trust of your child, whether it is through open mics, which are there in most multiplayer games, whether it was earlier in PUBG or Fortnite or Roblox or Call of Duty or whatever. If you have open mics because you're chatting with so many contestants or participants simultaneously, you know, everybody's saying pass on, pass on, pass on, shoot, pass on, move on, let's move on. There are people who are, you know, in that rhythm. While you're in that rhythm, say somebody is suddenly talking to you saying, how old are you? I'm 15, pass on, pass on. What do your parents do? My parents work. Pass on. Okay, what time does your mom come home? My mom comes home at 8. Okay, can I move to the next level? So imagine, in that adrenaline, when you're talking, you are not registering what you're answering. So when the mics are open, a lot of your personal information has gone out of your house. So there's a stranger who now has access to how your house works. And cyber experts have told me that this is how they swindle money, and this is how they get kids off. Then, you know, they build the trust and say, okay, let's chat offline on WhatsApp, and then imagery happens, and then blackmail happens. So all kinds of stuff is going on, and I think it's very important for us as parents today to teach our children cyber safety, cyber security, privacy. Privacy I found to be extremely underestimated. Again, a lot of mothers just dismissed it, Nita, saying it's collateral damage. I don't agree at all. I agree that, you know, okay, things are very open, but I think that we can take better care of how things are than we are doing at the moment.
Absolutely. In fact, not only this, you touched a lot of very, very important incidents which have made a mark and which stay with us. In fact, with respect to the boys' locker room, I feel that every second teenage boy at some time or the other goes through a phase of using jargon like that. Phrases sometimes which degrade, comment, and shame women. And that too comparatively easily, freely, without feeling bad about it. So do you think this has stemmed from being exposed to the internet without restrictions from an early age, or just the generation gap? Of where do you think it has stemmed from?
I think the exposure is enormous, Neeta. I'm not going to deny that. I think the kind of exposure that we have, which is why I find it ridiculous when people, say, oh, these books don't only happen in the West and this is all Western phenomena. And I'm just looking and saying, are you for real? I'm sure your child is streaming the same shows on Netflix and on Amazon Prime or wherever, on Hotstar, that a counterpart is doing it in Europe and the US. In fact, I say to the contrary today, when we talk about the Western phenomena, what I see actually happening in the West and in Europe, countries like Ireland, Nita, is there's a reverse trend. With people working in Silicon Valley and everything smarter than us, right? They've known that, we've got played. And so they are making sure that their children stay away from everything. And I remember when I was writing this book, and outside the gymnastics class, I met this gentleman, American gentleman, and he showed me his Nokia phone, and he said, "This is it. It's a 60 quid Nokia phone. This is all the gadget that we have in my house, and my children have no access to anything. They will not have access to anything." And I find the same going on in many European countries where they're trying to go back to basics, and they say that, okay, so we want to keep track of our children. Fine, keep track. Let's give them a phone. We don't have to give them a smartphone. And I say the same. You want, okay, once things open up, and I understand, in some places kids are going from one class to another after school, and you want to keep track of them, keep track of them. But we don't have to give them a smartphone that has YouTube or games accessibility. You want to keep track, give them a phone. Give them a phone that is a regular phone. You call them, you find out where are you, and carry on. We've given in too much too early to them. And I think we need to take stock, because I found that kids who were given the gadget too early, now when I find that parents are trying to take it back, they're finding it very tough going. They're not being able to take back these gadgets at the age of 13, 14, because kids are resisting it. It's become part of their lifestyle. And as much as we can fight it, I would say honestly, fight the battle. It's worth it. Keep my child every year, she says, a phone next year. Yes. Now 13, you've got to give it, mama. Yes, yes. You promised me. Yes, yes. We'll see. We'll see. I'm a mother. I'm allowed to change my mind. But like I said, the pressure is enormous, and you can't have them ostracized as well. So there's a give and take as well. And give and take to me is give the phone, but take away everything else from it.
Right. But how does one deal with the loneliness which has crept in, especially as a default of the pandemic which happened? Children are mostly at home, still at home, and still the coronavirus still is taking maybe some new strain, and we are still getting some containment zones, at least in Faridabad once again. So how do you think we deal with that? How do you feel this alienation starts, this loneliness starts? And that's when they start, we have to get to the stem of the problem.
I actually think that in a roundabout way, Nita, this is going to be a hard lesson for everybody to learn, because when I started writing the book before the pandemic, I would talk to children, and everybody, all the children are just sitting with a gadget alone. Play dates, you could see 5 children sitting with a separate gadget. No one's talking to themselves, and you're like, listen, stop, right? And now, a year and some months later, what do the children want? They just want to get out, get and go to the park and meet a friend. That's all they're craving for, right? They're craving for a play date. If you tell them go meet a friend, they'll drop that gadget like this today. And I think it's been a very hard lesson, and I hope we learn from that there's no substitute. I mean, I'm very scared for that social isolation, Anita, that our children have gone through, sitting with a gadget with no access to anything else, with no interactions. It's a bit worrying. And my younger one started school now. My elder one has also, but the younger one, when she started school, and that's again a reflection of how we deal with things as adults. When the pandemic happened, we as adults immediately went into this whole, our reaction was all about ourselves. If you notice, what are we going to do? Oh gosh, we've got to work from home. What are we going to do? Oh my God, how are we going to do our groceries? How are we going to do our fitness? Okay, we'll do it on Zoom. We'll do our yoga trainers, everything on Zoom. We're going to bake. We're going to have to cook. Our help is not coming. Everything was about us. It was not about the children. We just said, okay, they've got the gadget in their hand and they're sorted. They're not sorted. There's been a mess. My daughter, my 8-year-old, the first day she went to school and she came back, and I said, how was your day? And she said, Mama, I thought I had a wonderful day. I thought I was going to be in an actual bubble when you told me I'm in a bubble. And that was my bad. Again, The thing is, I realized we're only talking to ourselves. We ignored the children on so many levels, and it was such a basic level that I presume she knew what a bubble was, but she was an 8-year-old and she had no idea. So, I hope that this teaches us as parents, the pandemic teaches us as parents and children, that there is really absolutely no substitute for physical, personal relationships, for, face-to-face communications and meetings. And hopefully, things begin to ease out now with the vaccine rollout. And there's nothing, I do take my children out screaming, crying, but it's become a habit for them not to move, Nita. They don't move from the house anymore. To tell them to get out and get half an hour of fresh air is, it's hard, because they're just stuck now. It's very tough. It's very tough. So we've gotten pushed back, A, with the gadgets, B, with their social isolation. It's going to be a hard task, but I think it has to be done very fast, and at all levels, at all levels.
Very, very well said. And I think as parents, we need to take it up as our top priority. Josna, I can go on with my questions, but I have a very, very interesting set of people who want to ask you questions. And I'll begin with Dr. Neeta Dabai, MS Gynae and Ops. And in fact, she's the founder of Unfold Foundation. And she's very, very, I've seen her over years that she works for adolescent health. And she's also a research scientist with WHO. Yeah. Hi, Neeta.
Yeah, hi, Dita, and Josna, it was so lovely to hear about your book. And actually, I was just telling Nita that I have just not got down to reading it, but since my interest in adolescent health is enormous, and I just felt that you have touched a chord by writing this book, and practically brought about maybe a small percent of problems which of the society, maybe a smaller percent of the society, but nevertheless an extremely important one, because I have seen the dynamics in the lower socioeconomic group, and they are always trying to emulate the public school bred children, and they always want to be like that. And perhaps at some point they even have problems only because they want a cell phone and they want a better one, so they get into drugs and they get into all kinds of things, just wanting to do that. So to my question to you was that you have very beautifully brought out in your chapters, the chapter on body shaming, and the what you talked about in gaming. It's horrendous to think that we don't even know. It's like a tip of the iceberg. My question to you was, what kind of research did you do? Did you talk to the stakeholders? I mean, sometimes it's not just the parents who are responsible. A lot of blame can't be put on just the teachers, but there are so many others, the policy makers, somebody who's actually prescribed that syllabus for these people, for these young children to study. I mean, it's an enormous syllabus. So they all indirectly are stakeholders in our children's lives. Somebody who brought out this game, somebody who's marketing it. So there are so many stakeholders to this situation. We can keep putting the ball in either the parents' court or the teacher's court. A principal and a teacher, they are limited in their solutions, limited in finding solutions. So what about the other stakeholders you talked to? Did you speak to them? I mean, as a part of your research for the book?
Absolutely, I did. Firstly, I just want to go back to your original thing where you speak about, the lower strata of children, and the reason why I specifically stuck to urban children is because somewhere the issues are a little bit more different with urban, and urban and rural, and then it just kind of becomes like it becomes like a very bulky thing, because then the tendency would have been to go into too many different directions, which is why I stuck to one. But having said that, I found that stuff like gaming, PUBG and many other things have infiltrated. And I say this in a lot of the talks I give, that when I'm also talking of tier 2 cities here. So I'm not just talking about urban India, I'm talking of tier 2, even lower, because the kind of infiltration that has happened because of the cell phone, the smartphone. And anybody today who has the smartphone has the kind of exposure that, you know, you can't even imagine. So at somewhere, you know, with the staff, the exposure of a smartphone may mean porn addiction. Somewhere it would mean objectifying in a boys' locker room, but it tends to come back to the same thing, whichever strata you look at it. But the issues, yeah, I totally agree. I think everything is aspirational. I mean, the vaping is aspirational. And there was a term that a lot of these children who were, you know, the low strata in Mumbai were calling it pen hookah or something. So, you know, they find their own answers, but it's not like they're looking at everything that the other section of society is doing. But to come back to your answer, yes, the stakeholders were enormous. And I say that I actually think that the underlying theme through this book is a society that collectively needs to relook at many things, you know, whether we're looking at the fact that education. Now, I can't constantly be putting the blame on teachers or principals, and I can't, because at some level, even the parents have made it tough for you know, teachers to take action, or for students or for principals to do anything. And they've told me this. They tell me, they say, we, you know, so vaping is so rampant. This principal, she told me, she said, I keep calling the parents and I say that I have confiscated, and the parents will turn around and say, no, not possible. She said, but I have confiscated, and I'm telling you that you need to relook into this. This is an addiction. No, cannot be. So stakeholders keep changing, but I think more than anything, as a society, we need to relook as to how we are educating children today. I say this to a lot of schools, that I think the time to teach by rote and to think that Ghanti baj gaya, class is over, is long gone. I think life lessons need to come in. I think for some children who can't speak with parents, families at home, I think for them, schools now become like a surrogate, you know, wherever they find an adult to speak with. So I find that as a society as well, I think we need to incorporate a whole, you know, it has to be a little bit more of a holistic experience when it comes to our children. And whether it's gaming or, you know, cyber experts who are talking about these things, I think acceptance to me is the big thing. Whichever stakeholder you speak with, unless there is acceptance to the fact that things need to change, that things are happening, I think we're going to remain in denial. And unfortunately, I think as a society, we tend to remain in denial for whichever, you know, whatever happens. And whether anything, you know, I mean, you talk about LGBT rights. If this is what they're listening to around them in society, at home, how are we going to change their minds? How are we going to tell them that what they're saying is wrong? That, you know, just because it's how it's been said for decades doesn't make something right. But I think that a whole lot of us, I think it, like they say, it takes a village. A whole lot of changes need to take place at different levels to understand how we have to take this forward. Unless, I mean, I'm sure you know better than me, but I find that this is a generation that is very on the verge of, you know, being the lost generation, because they're also very aggressive, they're also very stubborn, but they're also lost.
Yeah, thank you. But yes, I agree with you that they're very aggressive, and I think what we really need to understand is what goes on in their brains, and it's part of growing up. It's the physiology which they are exposed to, and you very rightly said, thank you so much, that all of us as society need to understand, and it's perhaps parents and teachers who need to be re-educated on the priorities and the rights of children and how they function.
Like you said, policymakers, you know, if you're talking about something and saying, oh my God, sex education isn't cool, let's do yoga. What kind of message are we, as you know, we sending out to schools, to children? What can schools do then?
Exactly.
You know, that thinking needs to evolve. That thinking I find to still be stuck in a different time where everybody is, you know, watching Netflix and saying that's fine, but no, I'm sorry, our thinking is going to remain exactly as the ruling that came out, that same-sex marriages are not okay because it's not okay in our culture. How can we not let people decide for themselves? I think it's just very fun at a very fundamental level. We need to relook at a lot of things.
Yeah, you very rightly said, fundamental level. Thank you so much. Thank you for this interaction.
Thank you, Neeta. In fact, vaping, if people don't know, it is e-cigarettes, right?
Yes.
talking about?
It's e-cigarettes, and they look like a pen drive. So you actually don't know whether it's an e-cigarette or a pen drive that your child has. And they were usually smuggling it into their schools, either in their socks, shoes, or even in the geometry boxes, but you can't smell it. So what they call it, they ghost it. You don't smell it, and so you never know that they have had it.
Very sad.
But
And now
it's more harmful because that one pod, and they if they're addicted to it, they have more than one pod, but that one pod is equal to a packet of cigarettes, just a pod.
Very sad. Now we have Yuvraj Dhingra. He's a humanities student from DPS Greater Faridabad. In fact, he's also a vice head boy and has been very, very proactive in handling students' issues as a student council member. Yes, Yuvraj.
So first of all, ma'am, it's an honor for me to interact with you on such an eminent topic. And, being a teen myself, we all know that this life is so full of, dystopian realities. I would like to begin my question with the fact that teenage is often considered to be that period of unpredictabilities and with the plethora of unraveled problems. And we all know that the concept of moral facts existing force on an individual's pattern of behavior. So it's just the fact that children are more prone to get themselves associated with this negative connotation of teenage and problems. So in such a case, the child often gets misled because of peers and hyped social influencers. And in such a scenario, there is often that communication gap, so which is felt between the parents and the children. So how do we reduce that gap? And who has to take that onus of filling that communication gap, seeing that teens do not seem to open up with their parents much?
Oh my God, Yuvraj, this is a question that I've dealt with since this book has come out from a lot of children who've asked me this, that how it's all about the communication, right? I understand that. And a lot of children who've been saying that they don't know how to get through to their parents. And some, who've tried to tell their parents that these things exist. And I've tried to also understand that, and to the children I often say that if you feel that you can't get through to your parents for whatever reason, find another adult that you can speak with, whether it is your friend's parents or it is a teacher in school, but you need to find any adult that you can get hold of, who you can sit down with, who you're comfortable with, and who you can speak with. I think it's absolutely essential. I think for parents, it really would be helpful for them to understand that just because things didn't happen in our times doesn't mean things don't exist, that times have changed. And well, I'm not plugging my book, Yuvraj, but I normally say that just this book it's like a bridge between parents and children and their children. And if you actually, some children have gifted it to their uncles and their parents, saying that, we're just giving it anonymously, and we're hoping that they'll understand that these issues happen. Because I think for parents, it's very important to understand that we can't just say drugs nahi ho rahe or bullying nahi ho rahi. Everything is happening today, and the peer pressure, Yuvraj, I understand. I think it's enormous. It's enormous. It's at some level, I'd say that hats off to your generation for multitasking the way you all multitask, handling so many things from different quarters. But don't be stubborn and don't be aggressive, because you're also turning out to be a very aggressive generation. And I think that is coming out from social media. I don't know. I mean, that's something that a lot of children are learning. So keep your calm. And I say that for both parents and children, it has to be a step each. I can't say that it has to be just by the children or just by the parents, but I think everybody has to keep trying. But I understand if children say that, they're not getting through to the parents, then I would say that if you can't get through to your own parent, find a friend's parent, but get through to some adult to get clarity, to understand what is going on. I hope that helps.
Yes, ma'am. It definitely helps. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank you, Yuvraj. We have Gauri Mendiratha. She's a very popular art educator from Delhi Public School, Sector 19, Faridabad. Gauri.
Thank you so much, Neeta. Thank you. And ma'am, Jyotsna, ma'am, it's a pleasure to hear you, to be a part of this interaction. And I would, rather than putting a question forth, I would rather, say that it is actually, I've been in education for about, say, 25 years now. And I have seen children grown, from toddlers to teenagers and so on. And later, when they come back to you, you very rightly said, yes, that gap has to be bridged, between the teacher and the student. Just when the bell goes off, you cannot leave the class. You have to address their issues. They become a part of your life. And if you can give that thing to your children, nothing can ever take them to this mental state that we fear from, that is depression. I mean, they actually need somebody to talk to. In the urban setup, yes, the parents are very occupied. Most of them are not able to give the desired time to their children. And children, they being children, they look for things which are easily accessible, they are vulnerable to so much around, yet we don't care at times. So very, ma'am, nice book. I have read it thoroughly, and I have actually connected, and I could go back to the issues that you have addressed. These, I mean, have actually been a part of our day-to-day dealing with the children, and we have seen it all, ma'am. We've seen it all. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind words. But yes, I think that we all need to spend more time with our children. It's a struggle for a lot of us. Like I say, at the end of the day, sometimes we just want to do our own thing. But I see this with my own children. They'll be like, "Oh, Mama has no time for us." And so you have to and this has changed even more with the pandemic, because now they're used to having everyone is everyone is around 24/7, right? So no one's getting that gap. And I think even the children have understood, oh, Mama's here all the time, and Mama's understood the children are here all the time. And I think so it's changed a little bit of how we deal with each other, because I think the demands have changed as well. So Mama's got no time to play, or Mama is not spending any time with us. But I think we have to, if that's all they're asking, I think it's brilliant, right? They just want you to spend time
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think
they aren't actually asking for much.
Yes, exactly.
We must all understand that. Yeah.
Exactly.
This is the least we can give them.
Exactly. So I think we all, me included, we all need to just make a little bit more of an effort, and hopefully, we can take them through this maze till they're able to handle it better for themselves.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gauri. And now we have Aruna Singh, ma'am. She's the principal, Shalom Residency, and she's also an author and a life coach. Aruna Singh.
Hi, good evening, Jyotsna.
Good evening.
And I had been the principal for the last more than a decade. And whatever the issues you had been addressing, I think we had been going through that left, right, center. And I would like to just put in a word instead of asking, because there had been so many questions that have been asked to you. What I would like to say is, I think we really need to change our mindset. And there is a guilt trip, that is happening around the parents. Whatever their children ask, we give them because of the guilt trip that we have, because we are not able to provide them the time. We are not able to give them what they are asking. And since our childhood, I think fathers had been taking that onus, that fathers are the breadwinners, and they don't have to do anything, and they don't have the time. But the scenario now has changed, that both the parents have become working. So it's become much more difficult for the children to accept that. And obviously that connect is not happening. And we really need to change that in many ways and aspects. And how to go about that is the big question, because the parents, they have to earn, because they want to become much better than whatever they are. And another very big problem is now the exposure to the children is not only the internet, but today our holidays are also happening everywhere on the world. That's another thing, which is coming up. And that is another competition that is happening in the urban world, at least. So there is a comparison. For everything, there is a comparison. And that is exactly what we need to curb, And that is a big job, and that's a difficult job, I think.
No, it is. It's very true. You're very right. They're comparing for every little thing. And I have a friend who has who has 3 sons, and the eldest is almost 16, and none of them have a phone. And so every time every time one of the children would be like, this is what happens in that house, she's like, you're welcome to go live in that house. This is my house and my rules. So I think we have to be a little bit strict, because that comparison, and it's a very big comparisons. I mean, I don't want to give in if somebody else has a fancy Apple Watch at the age of 8. Why? I don't want to give it. I mean, maybe I can afford to give it, but the point is, it's the principle of the matter. I don't want to give it. And I think that's where,
that is where we are not becoming firm there, because we are scared of so many repercussions. I have come across parents saying that if the child takes a drastic step, what do I do then? There is so much of fear engraved in the parents because of, again, the aggression that the children are having, and the answers that you get from the children today. It's very difficult to hear them out.
Yes.
And you are speechless at times.
No, I can imagine. But that's what I said right in the beginning. We as parents and as adults, we don't say no enough to our children today. And I think
Perfect.
We give in too easily. And I think also the aggression then is really making things very difficult, because yes, you're right. A lot of parents are scared of what their children are doing. A lot of parents think it's easier, to just give in.
I have come across parents who tell me that, ma'am, since we are not with them and they are asking me something, it's okay with us to give those things, whatever they're asking for. But the repercussions are very big. At that momentary, yes, they are getting it, but later on, it's becoming a big thing, for everybody. It's again a circle of events,
Absolutely.
Until unless you don't stop it somewhere, it's a circle of events.
And I say stop it earlier rather than late.
Exactly. And about your cyberbullying, I would say that most of the schools, they are doing this education about cyberbullying quite late in life, I think. And now I think we should begin it much more early, so that they know what are the basic ingredients that they need to be taken care of. Because earlier, the better.
Absolutely.
Right.
So I think kids 8, 9, 10, they're exposed to so much already.
They are already sorted out. They have already gone into that. Where we have to begin, according to me, is somewhere around class 3 itself.
Absolutely.
You need to reinforce those things. The rules have to be put in there. Only then they can be firmed as later on in life. Thank you so much, Jyotsna. It was wonderful hearing to you, but I have to get the book. I'll certainly get it and go through it, because the topics have been from my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have last 2 questions, because we are already overshooting the time limit. We have Naina Sagar. She's a very popular theatre director, actress, and also Bollywood actress. Naina, please.
Hi. Thank you, Neeta. And hi, Jyotsna. It's been a very enlightening talk, what you gave. Myself, I'm a mom to 2 teenagers. One of them is about 20 now, and I suffered my share of issues with them at school and everywhere. So one thing which literally, like, there were times in their upbringing when, I consciously resisted not having even a TV at home for a long time. Until then, I think they were quite sorted. They used to have good grades, and they used to enjoy playing outside and, competitive sports and so on. But the minute the TV came in and they had the smartphones, things went downhill after that. So yeah, I totally agree with you about rationing the gadgets, the smartphones, especially when they're growing up. That helps them, The second thing what I noted was, this is particularly during this lockdown period. When the lockdown had initially started, there were many interesting posts on social media from parents saying how to go about it, trying to sort it out. And one parent's post actually got my alarms, the alarm signals tingling, wherein he had put it on his social media handle saying that, how do you ask your kids and all the adults in the home to stay at home? Why doesn't the government open up the porn thing? And that got me really. How are the kids? You might have a kid who is 14, 13 at home, and apparently, basically he's trying to say that, okay, open up the porn handles and let them also have a look at it. Just open it up. So what I want to know from you is, is this the general consensus among parents that, okay, we don't want a child on our hand? If the child is okay, can look through porn and can access porn, it's okay. It's open. Let's open up the society. Let the children. But I personally feel, okay, if there is something educative about it, okay, you can have it, but it is always a distorted version in porn. And unless you are 18, unless you are above, at an age where you can understand what is reality and what is fantasy, and fantasy which is distorted, I think that should not be accessible to kids. But this is something which came from a well-meaning parent, and that got me literally worried. So I wanted to know from you, do the schools, like my kids are not in junior school anymore, do the schools also have any particular rules as far as this kind of viewing is concerned for kids? I wanted to know from your end, what has been your inferences from the survey that you conducted? You must have conducted a massive survey.
Yeah, so I have written, there is a section on porn addiction that I've written about amongst children. And I've written about how children as young as 10 are addicted to porn today. And it all comes with a smartphone. So I don't know how much a school can stamp down on something unless, they're speaking about it in sex education classes. But what I actually found very disturbing about porn is that when you think about the kind of society we're a very misogynist society. And, it, like you said, it gives a very bad example to children going forward, the kind of violence that they take out of the porn, or the fact that this is what they think as normal. And unfortunately, not very many, they're not speaking to parents about it. It's all done on the slide from what I could gauge from the children. It's done. If you have a smartphone, you need your parents, they're very, very smart today, the children, they can figure it out. But what they don't understand is that this is not normal, that this is all, like you said, it's a fantasy. And unless parents, I think the onus on this has to be with parents, because schools, by and large in India, still don't encourage cell phones and mobile phones. And the phone is used mostly at home. And unless the parents are sitting, and it comes down to the parents. If the parent is, now a parent told me, she said a child came to me and said, and he was very young, and he said, oh, boys in my class are watching porn. And she said, so I sat him down and I said, there's a time for porn and this is not it. At the age of 12, 13, it is not it. And I think apart from sex education and these kind of conversations, I think porn conversations now need to step into the door at homes. I think we need to, I think it's better to educate the children beforehand, instead of them coming out with something that is, it's not normal. And it's to me, it's very, very scary in a society where we don't talk too much about consent. We don't talk about rights and sexual rights, to have young children and young boys especially viewing it and then thinking that it's normal. And that's what I found.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jyotsna. Yeah, we need something here from the parents' end, which is not happening in many houses. That is what I feel. So
the point is that how much can schools do? Schools are still struggling. Schools are still struggling to imbibe sex education. I don't see them. And again, this is, now imagine if schools start talking about porn. I'm not sure how many parents are going to take it kindly. How many parents are going to say this is okay? I think dhawa bol denge school pe, the way we are. This
totally.
is not. So I don't think that this is, to be fair to schools and educational institutions, I don't think that this is in their ambit, because they're going to get it from parents today. I think so. It's just better, I think, to have these conversations at home, to and to have conversations on sexual rights and consent very, very early. Consent equally for girls, I feel, as it is for boys. Every girl, and I say this to everybody, every child, whether it's a girl or a boy, has the right to change their mind midway, whether it is about sex or going to the movies. If someone said, meet me today, and you say yes, and suddenly you don't feel like it, you have the right to change your mind. It's very simple. It's your mind. And I think that the kind of peer pressure they're under, and it then comes into everything, whether it's watching porn or going out or having a smoke or drugs or whatever. I think the kind of peer pressure is so enormous that unless we have to instill these very basic fundamental things in them, that you have to stand up for what you believe, because if you have a strong base at home, I think they should be okay. But it's very, very hard to do. It is very hard.
Thank you, Jyotsna. Thank you very much.
Jyotsna, we just have one last question. We have Tanushree Nanda. She's a humanities student and she's an avid reader. Tanushree.
Good evening, Jyotsna ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, I just had one question that about whatever you have written in your book about shaming and the addiction and all that. Obviously, this generation is facing it a lot. But did you, in your times, witness it in person? Like, did you know some people who were addicted to such things, or who were subjected to such shaming and gaming and all that? Because I don't really have anyone to ask of that generation. I mean, I cannot really go up to my parents and ask. It's just awkward. But I just wanted to know that did you see anything like that in your times?
I was very thin all my life, so I've grown up hearing Sukri, Patli, all the words that go with, and it's not funny. It's not funny. I mean, people think conventionally shaming is only to those who are overweight, but it gets tiring and gets frustrating. And I see this with my elder daughter. She's also very thin, and every time somebody turns around and says that, "Oh, khana nahi milta," and I can see her just holding on. And I've heard this all my life. I've heard this all my life. Does your mother not feed you? Do you not get food in your house? And what was easier for us was that we were not on social media, and we didn't, and that changes a lot in your generation. So even if we face, gaming was not as bad as things are again today, for the simple reason we didn't have the kind of exposure or the kind of access that your generation has. So even if we were bullied or we were shamed, it stopped once school got over. We went home. It didn't carry on 24/7 the way it is on social media today. Anybody can be bullied, anybody can be photoshopped, anything can happen, right? And so things, it's not like drugs didn't happen, or these kind of issues didn't happen. They did happen in our times, but not to the extent that they are today, because we did not have the kind of exposure that you all have today at all. We barely had like one serial or drama to watch in a week. And we didn't have the kind of exposure, but and that in some ways made it tougher, because we also didn't know who to speak with. I mean, how much people who were getting bullied didn't also know how to go, because in our time the resistance to bullying and body shaming was even more than it is today. At least now, with the kind of exposure, people know body shaming is happening in schools, there's bullying in college, and it's illegal in institutions. But in our times, all this was okay. But again, we were not under the spotlight of social media. We did not have an Instagram or a Snapchat where we were always visible. We were not visible. So it was okay to just melt away somewhere in the background. So I think it's harder in your generation. It is.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Tanushree. And thank you so much, Jyotsna, for taking out your valuable time. I know you're busy writing, and this has been such a fruitful session for all of us. Thank you for making it today.
Thank you so much for having me today, Nita. And I just want to tell everybody that the book is available on Amazon, Flipkart, and in bookstores. So please do get a copy. I am on various social media handles, so I look forward to all kinds of feedback. Everybody's opinion is valuable. And so please do write in once you've got the book, and hope you all learn a little bit from it.
It's a wonderful book, and I'm sure it's been a major takeaway session today, and they'll all go back and definitely read the book and give you all the positive reviews. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for joining. You can catch us up on our YouTube channel. There are all the recordings of all the author interactions that we have done till now. And today's session will also be available in perhaps maybe by Sunday. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.